I'm Shane Thomas, and this is Analysing Doctor Who. I'm joined today by Rick Tetrault and Mike Robinson, and we are back to analyse the Christmas episode, Joy to the World. So if you have any thoughts on our upcoming thoughts or anything else Doctor Who based, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. That's analysing spelled with an S. So, Rick, if you just start us off with your episode rating out of 10 for this, please.
On a couple of different things you're going to ask me today, I'm going to need to give like two different ratings. Because part of the episode I give a 10, and part of the episode I give about a 7. And I'll explain that as we go along.
Mike, what's your rating?
I'll go with an 8.
Okay, I'm giving this a 7. So, Mike, if you just tell us your favourite part from this.
I think my favorite part of the whole thing is maybe not so much an exact moment or performance. I like the idea of the Time Hotel a lot.
The Time Hotel?
Okay.
What's that then? Time Hotel, what does that mean?
Oh my goodness. That was good,
All of human history now available as mini breaks? Is that how it works?
I thought you said you were from head office. Don't you know how it works?
I like to enter investigations with my mind completely blank. I fit in better.
Should I make my mind blank too, sir?
It may not be necessary in your case, Trev.
I think it was really kind of ridiculous and fun, almost in a different sense of humor, but almost in a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy kind of thing. Like, what could we do? What could be wild? What could be different? So the notion that you could bounce out of a room and bounce into another time period, I thought was really, really neat. And as someone who has wondered quite a bit about what goes on beyond those doors in hotel rooms, I'm pleased to have at least some sort of answer now.
Okay, Rick, if you give us your favourite part?
By the way, Mike, the whole Milliways vibe to the Time Hotel was nibbling at the back of my mind and never just coalesced. Thank you for that. Because I was like, there's something familiar about this. I totally agree. The Time Hotel is an amazing concept. My favorite part is actually the whole Anita thing. I've heard some people say that was their least favorite part of the episode. That was why I gave the episode a double rating. The Anita part, the year the Doctor spent with her, I give a 10. I loved every second of it. And then at the end, when she got hired on to the Time Hotel, Steph Diwali did so much with so little. It was so real. It was so honest. The chemistry between her and Ncuti is fantastic. I almost didn't really care about the rest of the episode. I wanted more of those two together.
Yeah, I have a lot more to say about that, but I'll save that for later in the podcast, even though I do broadly agree with a lot of what you said there. My favourite part, just as a individual moment, is the suitcase countdown.
Please reseal the starseed containment unit within 20 seconds, or the current case holder will be disintegrated with extreme prejudice.
Hello, excuse me.
I'm thinking.
Well, can you close the case and think?
I'm a very visual person.
But it's going to disintegrate me.
Good. You care about dying again. That means the control has loosened.
But I'm actually going to die.
Not for several seconds. Just live in the moment.
Please just close the case.
What is this? What is this for? Why would you bring this to the Time Hotel?
Close it.
I feel like I'm missing something obvious.
Close the case.
Quiet, please. I don't like being rushed. There. Closed. Bags of time.
To complete closure of the starseed containment unit, please enter your 4-digit security code, or the current case holder will be disintegrated.
Whoa. Oh, I didn't see that coming. Did you see that coming?
Do you know the code?
No, do you?
No.
I mean, 4 digits. That narrows it down to a possible 10,000 numbers. Feeling lucky?
Really not.
I mean, the variables are never equally weighted. I could figure it out if I just had...
What?
Time. The Time Hotel.
What?
I couldn't use the TARDIS again. I would re-engage the causal nexus, but in this hotel, the time zones are physically connected. They're already interacting, so in theory... Come in! 7214. 7214.
Who are you?
Me. Oh, okay, good. Oh, stabilizing. You're safe.
It's a very tense scene and it moves quick. And I think of many Moffat's best scenes just in his career generally are like this. There's tension and pace. So much of Sherlock was like this. when Sherlock is figuring something out and the score is moving quickly and Cumberbatch is moving around, pacing, and he's talking fast, and you usually get lots of cutaways to stuff on the screen. This felt a little bit like that. You feel like the plot racing and our lead character's mind racing in concert. Fixed with timey-wiminess, essentially, and I did like the notion of the Doctor trying to figure out, how do I figure out this number for the countdown, and realise I just need time. The different POV of like a Time Lord to a mammal, because essentially with enough time, there isn't a problem you can't solve, as long as you have enough time. And so the Doctor essentially is like, I can't fix this right now, but if you give me a year, I'll figure it out, which is what a Time Lord essentially can do. It's kind of an elevated way of solving a problem when you have a character like the Doctor, rather than if it was like, I don't know, Sherlock or James Bond or whoever. And also, as a like discrete single scene, I think it works quite nicely as a scene to show to people, like people who've never watched the show before, and you're maybe trying to show them what Doctor Who's about, or what Doctor Who can be about. This is a scene that I imagine, quote-unquote, normies, it would engage them quite a bit. And particularly, this is Christmas, so it's probably different than the rest of the world because it's on Disney+, but here, you will have quite a few people watching it over here who don't watch Doctor Who, who are aware of the show but don't really watch it. But it's Christmas, you're with family, your middle son is a Doctor Who fanatic and you can't understand him, but he wants to watch it, and it's like, oh, if it stops him moaning, fine, we'll put it on. And that's a kind of scene that you don't really have to be like a Doctor Who fanatic or anything like that, I think, to enjoy. And it also is a really good kind of writing sample of what makes Stephen Moffat quite distinctive as a writer. If you were looking for certain scenes to show to someone, you'd probably show them something like this. So as an individual scene, that was actually really, really enjoyable. And if we move on from the stuff we liked and the stuff we didn't like, Rick, have you come to what you liked the least from this?
Well, unfortunately, it's kind of tied into what you really liked, but further along in the episode. I think the thing that really bothered me in this episode, and bothered is really too strong a word because I really liked this episode overall, but the cop-out on the code kind of pissed me off. That it didn't come from anywhere. I mean, how hard would it have been to have him go actually find out the code instead of just say, I made up some numbers and they worked. And then when she asks why, well, the universe came from nothing, nobody complains about that. That's a cop-out. That's just like, you can't be bothered to fix this one particular plot bit when it would have been so easy to do.
Is that, I'm not even saying you're wrong, but is that also because you yourself are a more hard science guy as well? So something that's almost kind of like magical thinking?
Yeah, I think so. But the first time we watched it, everything was going so fast that I was like, hey, wait, but then the train had gone by. The second time I watched it, it pissed me off.
On rewatches, you'll always notice those things more. Exactly.
And I know that's, it's not particularly fair. Although, in the modern age of television consumption, multiple viewings do need to be taken into account.
It's not like back in any of our day where it was you watch something, you had to watch it at a certain time, and you saw it that one time. Unless you were lucky enough to catch a rerun, like you never saw it again.
Exactly. And, you could get away with something like, oh, it's moving so fast, they'll never catch it. And again, it's not like it ruined my enjoyment of the episode, but, you wanted us to pick a least favorite moment.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So it's not even the conceit of the whole year-round thing, but it's just give us a specific...
Yeah, I mean, how hard... I mean, even if it was just, Trev coming in a couple of scenes earlier and going, it's 1724.
I can definitely understand where you're coming with that. Again, I have more to say on that, so I'll put a pin in that for why it didn't bother me as much, even though I definitely see where you're coming from. Mike, what from this you like the least?
For a Christmas episode, I was a little sorry that Trev and the hotel manager, they die, and that's fine, that's Doctor Who, that's the show. But it was like, we're fine, we're living here as reflections of ourselves in this briefcase, don't worry about us. That bothered me a little bit. They either could have gotten some happy ending or some sense that they were ending up in a better place. I liked Trev. Trev was fun. He had a sort of willingness to help and a nice, easy comedy style. It's a kind of character that could work out fairly well. But then he's just kind of gone. So his ultimate fate is to happily sit in a star that he's not even in control of. It's just like, oh, you're gone. Sorry. Thanks for helping. It's a similar sort of thing for the hotel manager, right, who at least got that whole "you're a brave Silurian" speech. But that was a little disappointing for me. But it's not like a deal breaker. To me, it was just kind of like, well, who gets a happy ending here? And shouldn't maybe everybody get a happy ending in a Christmas special? So that's where I was coming from.
And there wasn't any consistency to what happened after the briefcase came off your arm.
Right.
Because like the first guy wandered around for, looked like at least half an hour before he disintegrated. And then the second dude, as within seconds, it's Doctor Who. So I'm not looking for laser sharp facts and stuff, but a little internal consistency goes a long way with me. And that one was a little weird. Yeah,
well, or like, is it like an eternal? How many hands did this briefcase go through? And if so, is there like this stack of people who are all, literally? It's weird. It's sort of like it's not following a regeneration pattern, right? It's not like this is the dominant personality because this was the last personality. So it's just an odd sort of fate there that maybe they just didn't have time to deal with, or maybe Moffat thought, oh, well, this is a happy enough ending. That was just a little frustrating, but that's just me being forced to pick a least favorite part. Overall, I was having fun.
I've slightly maybe almost like skipping ahead, but also wondering if part of like the deaths of the characters and them being alive in some form in the briefcase, there's maybe a little bit of what Moffat does when he dispatches like more distinctive characters, and it comes back, I think, to the Giggle episode where the toy maker is laying out what happened to all the Doctor's companions, and the Doctor tries to absolve it with, but the consciousness survived, but they're reanimated in some kind of hologram, and the toy maker's response, well, that's all right then. This feels a bit of a piece with that. They're dead, but don't be sad, because you can still basically see their face, so it's fine, yeah? But to mention the thing I liked the least was, I mentioned the suitcase scene as probably my favourite. Everything up to then was probably my least favourite. I mean, with opening maybe 10 to 15 minutes or so. The early exposition, oddly and very oddly given who was writing this, came off as really ponderous and lacked a lot of like speed and dynamism. I try to avoid doing this anyway, and I don't do this often. But with that opening in 10-15 minutes, I was looking at these scenes and just imagining David Tennant or Matt Smith delivering this dialogue, because the setup itself was actually fine in terms of what happens, the order it happens, the dialogue to set it up, I thought was all very strong. But the performances felt really, really sluggish. Like, if you go back and look at those scenes, imagine those scenes again, but imagine the dialogue delivered faster and with less gaps in between the dialogue. So someone says a line, and then someone else says a line. And I was thinking, why is everyone so slow? Speed up. Particularly because it's the discovery part, so your mind should be bouncing around. Very much like the suitcase scene. The suitcase scene was done right in terms of how everyone was talking, it was urgent, how it was edited between each different shot, fast, snappy. Early part of this was not. It was really, really slow. And I'm almost wondering if, I believe this was shot June 2023, and I'm wondering if on this part of the shoot, because they already would have done their first series, if some of the crew and shooting were just a bit tired. I'm just wondering, were they just a bit tired doing these scenes? Because it comes off as low energy, very low energy, which doesn't feel like this incarnation of the show at all. It's almost like a curate's egg, these 15 minutes. Because I don't think the rest of the episode's like this. But this part, and this is the part of the episode that should be like the light, comedic part that welcomes you in, settles you down, sets you up for what's to come, also brings in the people who aren't regular watchers, shows them what Doctor Who's about. And the setup was just the performances. And I think some of the camera shots and just how it was edited, nothing like offset, on set. It felt like something wasn't right there, and it's one of them ones where I do wonder if in years to come we'll hear some stuff about the filming of this episode that might reveal all. Because this episode, generally speaking, I'm not sure about abroad, but in the UK was pretty well reviewed. The approval rating is quite high on this one, but this part of the episode is why I was toying with giving it 6 rather than 7. I have given it over the 7 because I think a 6 would be overly harsh, because I think it does pick up, but the first 10-15 minutes I was sitting there a little bit worried, and I'd heard good things about this episode, so I'm like, this ain't the one at all, and it managed to kind of recover the situation.
Now, Shane, when you say that, is that the hotel lobby?
Yeah, the hotel, pretty much the hotel lobby. Yeah,
the hotel lobby. Yeah, okay. And that's interesting. I mean, I see where you're coming from. I don't disagree. I just really saw that as kind of like that's how hotel lobbies are. I don't know. It felt like a lot of hotel lobbies I've been in. I doubt that was a deliberate choice. And I'm not saying somebody sat down and said, hey, let's be like a hotel lobby. But that's how it felt to me. Like hotel lobbies are kind of slow, weird places where weird conversations happen.
They are, but with the Doctor, particularly a character as dynamic as the Doctor, and the Doctor does this all the time. They change the energy of any room or space they're in when they show up. And it's not like he can't do that. We're not asking him to do something he can't do. So I am wondering what happened, and was it just, we're all exhausted, it's 3 a.m., let's just get these scenes out?
What I took it as, how many times has the Doctor been told, especially in the new Who, for lack of a better term, don't be alone? I took the pacing of the beginning of this as showing what happens to the Doctor when he's alone. He just kind of becomes unfocused and just sort of drifts like, a mote of dust in a sunbeam. And it's not until he discovers there's something going on here that then we get that, getting dressed scene and, fuck yeah, now I've got a thing to do.
Well, even that, but I think I had an issue, the same issue with those scenes. I don't even when he's coming out in his dressing gown and his robe. Even when he's like, meant to spring into action. The speech patterns, the cadence, and even the movement, like the physicality. It almost felt a little bit like this is what I don't think they have time for rehearsal, but like what they would do in rehearsal when you're just figuring it out and you're not, you're not fully in, your energy's not up. It was very curious more than anything else, rather than damaging like to the episode. Just odd, because I think of all the people involved. I'm just like, you wouldn't associate that with anyone involved in this episode. So it's very odd. But if we move on to dig a little deeper the episode, this was written by Stephen Moffat. Now, I've got more to say about Moffat myself, but if I come to you first, Mike, in terms of your thoughts on him in relation to this episode.
It's very Moffat-y, if that's the adjective form. It felt very, almost like a Moffat sampler, right? There were a lot of things in there. Structurally, it's an odd episode, right? Not to go back exactly what we were talking about, but it's time travel. An episode can start wherever you want it to start. They made a decision to start with the fun oddness. Who is this guy popping through our door? We all know, because we're Doctor Who fans, but that's sort of fun. Then you have that little bit of pacing slowdown there, and then you jump into these very big, wild concepts, and then you stop and you say, oh, what happens to the Doctor for a year when he isn't playing in the TARDIS? Then you go back to the regular adventures. So it was very much a kind of, because Moffat's always been very interested in these sort of fast time ideas, and even if it's something as simple as, well, what happens if an angel touches you and you go back in time, is kind of something he enjoys doing. But I think he's also very interested in what happens to the Doctor and what it means to be the Doctor. Sometimes to the point where during the era when Moffat was the showrunner, I was very frustrated because I felt like it started a little bit with Matt Smith. There was a lot of time in the Capaldi era where there was just too much what I called navel gazing, and there was too much time spent trying to figure out, am I a good man? Am I good at this? This, that, and the other. And the same sort of thing was happening in Sherlock at the same time. But I think that's something that Moffat, that's something that he is very much getting into and likes exploring and likes poking around in. So I kind of thought, well, it's this big time travel adventure with this pause in the middle to kind of say, oh, well, who is the Doctor and why is the Doctor alone? And maybe the Doctor needs to learn about this idea of chair day, right? Which is basically have a friend. And wrapped up in the sorts of things that I think Moffat likes to do. The notion of, why is there no chair in this guy's TARDIS? Like, why is there no chair to sit down? Well, there's a reason for that. Much of the same way that the episode is like, why are there these doors that you can never open hotels? There's a reason for that. Why are there statues that sometimes we think moves? Oh, there's a reason for that in other older episodes. So it felt very Moffat in mostly good ways to me. If this was his last episode, I would be okay with that. If the bomb episode earlier in the season had been his last episode, I would have been more okay with that. I would have said, wow, you really went out strong. I don't believe for a minute this is his last episode. So I'm not willing to say that this guy will never get involved again. The short version of all of that is very Moffat, right? Shane, you were saying earlier, if you wanted to say to somebody, oh, what's Doctor Who about in a quick, easy way? Oh, what's Stephen Moffat about in a quick, easy way? I think you could use this episode to some degree.
I reckon if I should bring you in on Stephen Moffat.
The joy part of it was very Moffat. Very standard, what we've gotten for the last decade and a half of Doctor Who. And not that that's bad, but I think it's telling that the part I liked the best was the part that was originally written to just be a couple of lines and then forgotten about and ended up taking over, a quarter of the episode, which was the year spent in the hotel with Anita. That was something that sort of grew organically when they realized how well the two actors were working together and how much Steph Diwali brought to Anita, and it just grew. And that part of the episode is very atypical for a Moffat story. Maybe why I liked it, I don't know. I don't want to bash Moffat, but I do remember when he left, when he announced he was leaving the show, I was like, yeah, it's kind of time to go. And the joy part of the story, the typical Doctor Who part of this story, was kind of the least interesting part to me. So if this is Moffat's last one, I probably won't notice. That may sound a little blunt, but he gave a lot to Doctor Who. I don't want to take away from the man at all. But everything aside from the Anita part of this episode was just kind of, standard by the numbers Doctor Who. And if that's what folks want, fine. But the part that stands out for me in this episode is the part that was different.
The story apparently goes as far as Anita goes, is that Anita, the character, was given 10 lines. I don't even know what position she has at the Sandringham Hotel. If she's like a manager or what. She seems to be the only person there. But she was meant to have 10 lines. The Doctor having to go the long way around for a year, which just meant to travel the world. But they realised that would be too expensive. Filming, the Doctor in India, the Doctor in Peru, the Doctor in Papua New Guinea or whatever. To save money, they kept him in the hotel. And part of the reason they did that is because they really liked the work Steph Diwali was doing with Anita. Said, well, why don't we give her more to do? And then that chunk of the story came through that. And as far as the final episode goes, there were a lot of talk in the build-up. Moffat basically did all the media himself. I think the final episode things, he was asked about writing for Doctor Who in future, and he said, I'm paraphrasing by the way, this isn't a direct quote, but he basically said, I'm not on the staff for the upcoming series 2025. And the fact is, we don't know in what form or how much Doctor Who we're getting beyond 2025. Disney haven't officially, as far as we know, signed on for more Doctor Who beyond next year. Doesn't mean they won't, it just means nothing's been signed and announced yet. So as far as we know, we don't know how much more Doctor Who there'll be. So that's why Moffat said, well, so yeah, maybe that this is it for me, because we don't know specifically what the future of the show is. So technically, it might be his last. I also agree with Mike. It seems unlikely that he's done, because he clearly, it wasn't what he did at his time as showrunner and was like, okay, I'm exhausted with that. That's a part of my life that I'm proud of, but I'm done with. He said in his exit interview, I always tend to bring that exit interview up when we record this podcast. He did mention toward the end that
if there was an emergency and they said, please God, could you write another, please could someone help us and write another Doctor Who story? I could write one. I can do that. I've got a form. I know how a Doctor Who story works. I can still do that.
The kind of way like Tom Brady, as an American football I'm referring to, but Tom Brady, even at his age, he knows how to throw a football and pick someone out making a route. Doesn't mean that he should get back in the NFL and put the helmet on again, but he still knows how to throw a football. He hasn't lost that. And Moffat still, it's like, I can write an episode of Doctor Who if you need me to. And that's why he wrote this one. If anything, the thing that stood out to me is that, at least in the past, not maybe for this next series, but in the past year, Stephen Moffat, and I think I mentioned this after we did our episode Analysing Boom, but he is the vice showrunner of this show. The reason why he wrote this is that Russell T Davies said that, I haven't got the time, we're too busy right now on the next series. Stephen, could you write this? But would Russell have done this with any other writer? I cannot envision there's anyone else in this situation he would have been willing to give it to and just totally trusted to do it. I think if Stephen Moffat had not been available, or they didn't have the relationship they have, I think Russell T Davies probably would have written this in a rush and it might not have been very good at all. Obviously, the holiday specials are a modern incarnation that Russell gave to us. And this is the only time the first one was 2005, so we've had 20 years of these. It's the first time in 20 years a non-showrunner has written the holiday special, the Christmas New Year's episode. Every time it was either Russell or Stephen Moffat's Chris Chibnall, and they were always the showrunner at the time. It's the first time a non-showrunner wrote the episode. And to come back to what I said about the vice showrunner, Moffat, in some interviews, he basically showran this episode. He did what he did back when he was showrunner. As far as he didn't just type it out on a script, email the PDF off and say, there you go, Russell, do what you need to a bit. Like, he was in all the meetings and was in Cardiff while they were filming and stuff, and worked on this, not the whole series, but this specific episode, worked on it as if he was the showrunner.
I mean, we had a meeting about Boom. And then they were going to go and do a meeting about the monster in the Space Babies episode, and I just wandered along to the meeting and threw in my my few cents worth, and suddenly realised about halfway through, I'm not even supposed to be here. I don't do this. It's not my episode. They were quite happy to let me, so it was all right.
He has incredible level of access for someone that's not the guy in charge. I mean, in some ways, it feels like almost the dream job into the writing for Doctor Who, because you get so much kind of privileges and power with limited, I'd say no responsibility, but limited responsibility. Because if it goes wrong, then who does the internet go after? They go after the showrunner, and that's not Stephen Moffat right now. I imagine for him, it was just a great situation to be in. To reinforce something Mike said, this episode felt like a compilation album of Moffat's greatest hits.
Moffat and Davies, they seem to have that kind of relationship. You fantasize that one calls the other up and says, the doctor is stuck in a bear trap in the middle of Dalek headquarters. How's he get out? Oh, do this. Doctor Who was always a product where the producers, the showrunners, the writers had their stamp, but it's certainly become in its modern era very much that sort of thing. So it's just kind of interesting to get that feel of people and who they are and what they bring.
Well, it's definitely Russell, as far as at least Stephen Moffat clearly isn't so precious of it's my show now, don't touch. At least with Moffat, he clearly trusts him enough to give him the wheel of the car and say, you can drive for a bit. I'll just nap in the passenger seat. I don't even need to watch where you're driving. And Moffat did use this to go to, we had in this episode a whole mystery box, the episode deliberately out of order, it kind of fizzes through different time periods, the bootstrapping thing with the suitcase code, the vehicle taking you where you needed to go, not maybe where you want it to go, and a circular plot that resolves literally in the final scene. With the scene with the suitcase when after the code, where you now have two doctors, I noticed this rewatching it. It shows also how different perspectives can make the same thing different, but depending on how it's experienced and when it's experienced, and how we experience things differently through time context. So the first time, the doctor's like, how do I get the code? And the other doctor's like, you'll find out. And in that moment, where with the first Doctor, who's frustrated and why are you being so mysterious? I saw you all yours alone, and he almost actually gets to insulting himself. And then the second time we see it with the second Doctor, we've seen it through his point of view, so we understand why he goes, you have to go a long way around, you'll find out, I'll see you later. And that is exactly the same, but like in real life, where sometimes you experience a situation that feels like the worst situation in the world, and then maybe you look back on it 3 years later and you're like, actually it wasn't that bad. It felt bad at the time. With the benefit of hindsight, it's actually not as extreme as it felt in that moment. That's something that I think is very Moffat in terms of playing not just with time, but how time is perceived through characters' eyes, and also how that's where the speech in Blink comes from. People don't get time. It's not linear cause to effect. Big ball, timey-wimey. And also, I believe I mentioned there was a lot of story to get through in this episode, which meant we got some good stuff we might not have got, but maybe hurt the overall cohesion of the entire episode. And that might be because he's like, well, if this is the final time I'm going to do this, I'm not holding anything back. I'm going to try and get every idea that's in my head in my distinctive style into this. I think it was 53 minutes. Into these 53 minutes, and I think that partly explains some of the aspects of the episode, good and bad.
You know what? The perfect example of that is the whole Sylvia Trench thing. I'm going to take a few minutes to take this character from James Bond that I think never got treated right and just give her a few minutes. That sort of thing kind of definitely proves your point there. Of all the possible things you could do, Sylvia Trench, I've always felt she was treated badly. Here's a slightly happier ending for her.
Is that the woman on the train?
That's the one on the train, which I did not realize until I rewatched and saw the listing. That's Sylvia Trench. That's from the character from the James Bond movies. They even found somebody that looks an awful lot like her. It does very much sort of have that feel, Shane. I think you're right, of kind of, I'm going to do this.
He might have saved this for future episodes, but he's like, there might not be a future episode, so I'm not saving it. It's all going in.
I have a question for you, Shane, because there was a deficit in this episode, and we're talking about the writing, that, depending on how you answer, may explain it. Nicola Coughlan?
I think it's Coughlin. I think it's kind of a hard sound GH, okay. even though I say that, like, I in Irish, I'm definitely, I'm from the people the Irish hate, so I hope I haven't got that wrong.
Then that may actually answer my question anyway. Is she a big name over there?
Yes. If we move on to, like, additional observations anyway, and I'll just do I'll do one of mine first, and I'll come back around to you. Nicola Coughlan is, I won't say like A-list, but no, she more than truly passed the Graham Norton test, because she was the one on the Graham Norton sofa to promote this episode for Doctor Who. And Ncuti's on stage right now. He's doing Importance of Being Earnest. She first was famous for the sitcom Derry Girls, which you may have heard of over there. It was bigger over here. That's what she made her name. And then she became a more global star with Bridgerton. Her character got a spin-off, like a Bridgerton spin-off, that I think was on TV in 2024. He did fairly well, so that's where most people would know her from. I believe she speaks an English accent in that, but she is Irish.
Because that is something that I've seen multiple times in Doctor Who, and I'm not criticizing at all, but there will be somebody in an episode that to me is just another person in an episode, and then we'd hear a podcast about it, either the old Greatest Show in the Galaxy or with Analysing Doctor Who, and you're like, oh, so-and-so, I wouldn't have imagined them in Doctor Who, but they were fantastic. And then I realized, oh, they are somebody that I've never heard of.
They're the equivalent of, like, I remember sometimes watching like old US sitcoms, and every now and then a famous person, particularly the ones taped in front of an audience, and a name would come in.
The audience goes nuts when they come on stage.
And the audience loses their shit, and I'm there, as a kid thinking, I don't know what the fuck that is. It's basically that.
And normally it's not a big deal. Normally it's just like, oh, like the one where Matt Smith's doctor had a roommate, and the guy that was his roommate was somebody.
James Corden.
Oh, it was James Corden,
yeah,
right?
But this is before he made it in America. Yeah, famous over here, but he wasn't in America at that point.
But it didn't affect the show. This time, I really felt that there was, assumption is probably too strong a word. It may have just been totally subconscious, but I felt like there was a lot less character development of Joy because it's Nicola Coughlan. And I felt like there was a lot of weight put on, you know who she is, therefore we don't have to tell you who she is kind of thing. Because I really felt her character was the least developed of anybody in that episode.
I mean, I think this is one of my notes. For a big-name guest star, she was given very little to do. I think you might as well have cast someone less famous. Maybe not as many people watch, because it's the one from Bridgerton, it's the one from Derry Girls. But as far as what she got to do, didn't think she had enough time than Ncuti at all.
I'm going to go completely opposite of you all. I think she got the most pathos to lift there. I would agree that for a good part of it, that character seems, for lack of a better term, maybe not as baked, not as cooked, right? Not as developed.
Severely undercooked, I thought.
But I think that's part of what she's supposed to be. I think that her star persona there actually leads us to think of, oh, what a nice, sweet girl. And she's got this mess of what you could call PTSD, right? She's got this terrible thing that she went through that involves COVID, that really involves a particular English take on COVID, right? Because at one point they mention the people having their wine parties. That was a swat against Boris and friends. And I think that that's what makes those moments stronger. If there was more zing early on, if she was Karen Gillan, that wouldn't have worked as well. But she sort of has to be there, kind of plain and simple. And these folks in these Christmas episodes, you're supposed to look at them and go, oh, they could have been companions. And for a long time, you're kind of like, she's the companion, sort of. But then suddenly she gets this big dramatic moment. I think that that's what she's designed to be. I think that that's what she might be about, or at least the way I read it. I think if she had been a bigger pop, if there had been a bigger wow factor, then the stuff with Anita wouldn't have been as interesting. And we would have been kind of like, all right, whatever, get back to this far more interesting person. I'm breaking the rules here, but she's my MVP. So, that's
you say that the Anita part wouldn't have been as interesting, because I've been thinking about that as we've been talking, and I think that's why the Anita part grew, is because there wasn't that much to Joy.
Yeah. Because
I would have happily lost the Anita storyline if they had done more with Joy.
Right.
Because, she was, I was bawling at the end. I'm not going to say she wasn't effective at all. We got enough exposition at the very end that, when she went to her mother and stuff, I was weeping right here on the couch, even the second time I watched it. But it just felt like they just kind of waited too long to have this character mean anything.
Also, the notion of if she'd have been there plain and simple, the problem was she wasn't there. She could have been plain and simple the whole way through until you get the emotional break. That's fine. Have her be plain and simple, but have her be present. She wasn't present in any way. That was the issue. And it's like you have, and I put this on social just after the episode. I said, pick a lane. They tried to drive down both lanes at once. Pick the Anita storyline or pick the Joy storyline. And I think you probably have a better episode there. And had Nicola Coughlan not been Nicola Coughlan, they might have just gone with the Anita storyline. But because Nicola Coughlan, we need to have something. We need to give her something. The scene she has to do in prehistoric dinosaur times, that scene's actually really good.
When your mother looked into your squishy little baby face and named you Joy, was it a joke, do you think? Was she having a laugh?
Don't you dare talk about my mother.
Oh, I'd love to meet her. She sounds like a riot.
She's dead. She died in hospital. I couldn't even visit. I had to talk to her on an iPad because of the rules.
Oh, the rules.
Yes, the rules.
And I bet you're good at obeying those rules. Funny, smiley, I'll be no trouble little you.
Don't you say that. Don't you say that!
Never mind poor old mum, right? As long as her good little girl is obeying all the rules.
She died on Christmas Day. On Christmas Day! And I say goodbye in an iPad because of the rules! She died alone! And those awful people in their wine fridges and their dancing and their parties, and I listened to them, and I let my mother die alone! I can never be home on Christmas Day. And I can never be with anyone on Christmas Day because I let her down. I let her down on the last day of her life on Christmas Day. I can never change that.
She was incredibly incidental. It's true that Mike, that often the best Christmas guests are ones that feel like they could have been companions. Nicola Coughlan was being linked with being the companion before we knew about Millie Gibbs's casting, however many, a couple of years ago now. Nicola Coughlan was linked as, who'd be great at that, Nicola Coughlan, and she would be. But you wouldn't know that from watching this episode at all. And that's no way a judge on her as an actor. I have quite a few additional observations, so let me leave them for a minute. Rick, do you have any other observations, just random ones we haven't touched on yet?
I really loved rotational Mavity. I love when they throw the Mavity in just as a throwaway.
It's still there, whatever that is. They haven't forgotten that.
Oh, and one other thing, this episode really drove home for me. Ncuti Gatwa has the most incandescent smile as a doctor since Tom Baker.
Yeah, it's like if someone's turned on a light inside his head.
Yeah.
and the light radiates out. Yeah, very much. That's a great comparison, actually, yeah. Since Tom Baker, I'm with you on that.
Well, I hadn't realized, when I was a kid watching Tom Baker, of course, such an observation never would have occurred to me. And then a couple of years ago, I was rewatching an old Tom Baker episode for something maybe it was for a show we did here. And I never realized just how amazing he would light up when he would give that smile. And Ncuti is right up there with him.
Mike, do you any observations that we missed?
Well, first of all, I would say my mom would also totally agree with that, who said at least twice during the episode, he has such a nice smile. I did really just enjoy the madcap nature of it, which I think we've hit on quite a bit. I think that it's always fun to have a run around. It's always fun to have characters moving. I would agree that in some spots things were not moving as quickly as they could have. But it was really, really great, really, really good time. And I would also say that I absolutely loved that brief little moment in the Doctor's Time on Earth, the whole deal of my car won't take me where I want to go. It takes you where you need to go. That was nice. That was clever. That was cute. Oh, and why is it changed color? That was fun. That was good stuff to me. But yeah, otherwise, I think I've peppered in a lot of little stuff that I've seen while we were talking. Oh, but I do want to say really quickly, you had mentioned the importance of being earnest. I believe I just checked and looked. I think it's February 20th that becomes available. I'm not exactly sure how, but there's information out there online on how to catch that. So Rick, there's your potential dream come true without cost.
I need to look that up.
I do believe it will be available. Like NT at home. I mean, there are a lot of actually great recorded plays on there. Some of them involving former doctors.
But no, I had a lot of fun. I think it's nice to always have the show back. I live not in fear, but I always think every time we return, even if we're returning, like you said, Shane, it's been 20 years now we've been doing these Christmas things. It's still great to me that it's back and it's doing those Christmas things. I grew up as a kid watching on Maryland Public Television, where you just ached for new episodes to show up and just waited for those things to happen. So be in a world where Doctor Who just keeps coming back is always, not to be a deliberate pun or anything, but it's always one of the great joys of the show for me.
Yeah, I just realized this was the first time we were able to watch a Doctor Who Christmas special on Christmas, because usually we had to wait till the next day.
That is the one advantage of I don't know exactly how simulcast the cast is, but it's close to globally. So yeah, there are a few things I noted down, like just a kind of, I guess maybe a final note and Joy is, I still think there's more to be revealed about what happened with this script, but when Joy meets Anita right at the beginning at the Sandringham Hotel, she's actually very talkative with Anita early on. And it's very clear that she's kind of looking for someone she's a very lonely person looking for someone to talk to. Moffat said, this of course says to me that he did really think about his character. He didn't just throw it in. That he said about Joy is that
she's actually, when you first meet her, deeply sad. But like a lot of deeply sad people in real life, you can tell she's sad by the amount she smiles, which is too much.
And that was actually quite well rendered, is that then we didn't see anything again from her for about 20 minutes. It is notable in Nicola Coughlin's performance that she's peppering silences, cannot bear a silence for too long, which is actually a nice character beat, as Mike already mentioned. And I think the TARDIS Wiki has actually put Boris Johnson in its canon now because of the scene when she references a lot of people out in the UK probably won't know this. Like, Rick, are you aware of what Partygate is?
I think I heard something about it, where Boris Johnson was having parties on the taxpayers' expense during COVID.
Yeah, essentially when everyone was locked down on quarantine, no one could leave the house, unless they had very specific reason to do so. They were, not just him specifically, but yeah, people who were working in government in number 10 Downing Street were having parties, like wine fridges were being brought in, people going to the off license and coming back with like bags and bags of booze. Pretty much everyone else in the country was following the rules, people not going to funerals, because you're only allowed to have, I think, 3 people maximum at funerals, so people couldn't attend funerals. You kind of see a little bit of this in hospital, people having to say bye to loved ones. They can't come in a hospital, you're not allowed to come in a hospital, so you say bye to your loved one who's dying on an iPad. While Boris Johnson's government doing this, that's really the thing that brought him down, by the way. His approval ratings were quite good up to then. It wasn't the final straw, but you can trace the downhill of him and the Conservative Party, really, from that point. Because it was hold on, if these are the rules, and people who could contravene these rules, even minor contraventions were being, like, fined and prosecuted by police, like criminal records, and then you have the government doing this. It was fury and understandable fury. I'm not judging.
Oh, yeah.
Understandable fury and absolute outrage. It's a thing that usually people can't stand about governments more than anything else, no matter what your politics are, just hypocrisy. And that explains the explosion of anger and sadness from Joy. That seems very good. It does strike a chord, I think, particularly I think people outside the UK might not really understand that. But it does strike a chord, and I did see some of the online reaction. I had a quick look online after the episode, and there were quite a few people like, I'm so glad someone finally put this on TV, because really, if you look at our TV, the pandemic just doesn't exist, which I know isn't just a British thing, but the fact that it was acknowledged. And in a way, when families are together, and I imagine there's some families together and there's an empty chair because someone who probably passed away during that time. And I'm sure it's painful to think of that, but it's also, I'm glad someone acknowledged it. I'm glad someone acknowledged that time, because TV over here really hasn't. Another thing Moffat did with shooting this episode, he mentioned on Boom, and I think we mentioned this on Boom, there was an episode commentary, which I think is on YouTube as well. But there was an episode commentary for Boom. It was Stephen Moffat, Russell T Davies, and one of the producers, I think. And they'd filmed the Christmas episode by this point, but they didn't want to give anything away. But they're talking about the scene in Boom when Ncuti gets really angry, and Moffat saying how much he loved what Ncuti did during that scene. And then Moffat just casually mentioned, like, yeah, there's a scene in the Christmas episode, you know, where Ncuti gives it the full Capaldi, he called it. I remember him mentioning that, so I was like, okay, I'm interested when we see that. And once you watch the episode, you're like, oh, okay, that's the scene, that's what he's talking about. And interesting, the line, I made you angry to wake you up. It feels like that has like wider political context of sometimes to wake people up, you actually do have to make them angry. The suitcase is a nice conceit. I just like it as an idea, because what it does is that the person holding it is aware what's happening, but they're kind of manipulated and overwhelmed by an arms company, essentially. It's interesting that the suitcase only ever seemed to be worn by people who had seemingly quite low self-esteem and very low self-confidence, because generally people like that are easy to manipulate. And it is, the Doctor has to poke Joy at the sorest of sore spots to overcome that more than anything else. At that point, low self-esteem and low self-confidence is not an issue for Joy. She's angry and is leaning into, like, you know, her justified anger and grief. That only came up on a rewatch. I realised all the people holding the suitcase were, because the Doctor never holds it.
Villain Guard to me is fascinating anyway, because they're one of those Doctor Who villains where it's like, oh, I fought them before. Oh, okay. Well, obviously that's some story because even in Boom, he talks about not liking them. But the neat thing about them is they don't have a person, right? They don't have somebody to stand up. To go really old school, Tobias Vaughn. So Tobias Vaughn is the evil corporate human face of the Cybermen's invasion. We don't ever get that from Villain Guard at all. They just plow through these people and then sort of use them as their PR face. Yeah, that makes him even worse if you think about him just manipulating people that way. That's wild.
It's like in the real world, Lockheed Martin. Who's the CEO of Lockheed Martin? I don't know.
Yeah.
So you can't kind of go up to them and say what they're doing is wrong. You don't know who the fuck they are. Quick trivia thing: when the Doctor goes to the Himalayas with the mountain climbers, one of the characters is a Sherpa called Tenzing Norgay. This guy's the first man to climb Everest with Sir Edmund Hillary, but a lot of people don't know his name. So he features among the mountain climbers, and what was really nice was the person who played him was his relative, a great-great-nephew, Sam Sherpa Morley, who apparently works in like mountain climbing. He does kind of, I think, helps people who climb mountains and stuff. So he still works in that field. But yeah, they got his great-great-nephew to play him. The doors in the Time Hotel, some of them are very themed. There's especially a Tolkien one. So like Tolkien heads were kind of losing their shit saying that Tolkien is now Doctor Who canon. Yeah, interesting. The Doctor appears to still read physical newspapers. He truly is an old man, because 2 occasions you see him with a physical newspaper. I want to be clear, this is not a spoiler, but if anyone is maybe worried about this, maybe you want to skip ahead a few minutes. This is not spoiled. This is just a fan theory. One fan had this theory online, and this fan said it might be bullshit, but it is a very, very fun theory. And it comes back to Anita and the Anita character. And why you wonder the whole thing about she had 10 lines and then she was really good, so we gave her more lines. Is that this is Stephen Moffat talking, it's Russell T Davies talking, and they are not obligated to tell us the truth. They are obligated to say what they need to help promote the show. So the theory,
they lied to us many times.
Yes. So the theory is, this is not no inside info, no commentary from anyone official. It's just a fan who just kind of went on a flight of fancy. And their theory, they wonder if Anita is Mrs. Flood. The theory is based on some of the things. Anita asks about Ruby, and Doctor's like, need to let her get on with her life, and she shrugs and like, yeah, we all need to kind of let people get on with their lives. She asks the Doctor what Auld Lang Syne means. Doctor says it's, basically means about forgetting old friends, and it's like 2 old friends. And you kind of wonder, is this an old friend the Doctor has forgot? That period of the episode when they spend a year together. The Doctor volunteers a lot of details about himself and about himself as a Time Lord. But he basically reveals what the TARDIS is. He talks about the Weeping Angels. We see what the sonic screwdriver is. The whole bigger on the inside thing with the microwave. There's quite a few bits of information over a year that he's given to Anita. And then what does Anita do? At the end, she's working at the Time Hotel. So now she would probably be familiar with the notion of time travel and fantastical stuff that is beyond the realm of, our earthly understanding. And Mrs. Flood is definitely an older person. Now, this does not mean that Anita is Mrs. Flood. It's an interesting theory, I think. And particularly because the chair nights they have. It's the Doctor, Doctor's told you understand how alone you are. You don't even have any chairs in your own ship. So the Doctor ends up asking Anita to have a chair, and they sit down and they talk and they share with each other and they're vulnerable with each other. And in trying to fix his loneliness, has the Doctor inadvertently made himself very vulnerable? Because he's given Mrs. Flood a load of information that could potentially be weaponized against him. Now, we don't even know what type of person Mrs. Flood is going to be. But we know we will definitely see her again. Might be bullshit. Fun theory.
I would love it if she came back as an ally. If she's an antagonist, I would hate that with a flaming passion.
It's just interesting, the idea of the Doctor maybe having a reckoning with the Doctor, and maybe how he sometimes leaves companions, because Anita says, when he says bye, it's like, I knew this was coming, and try and think about me sometimes. And maybe not. Again, maybe not. We will see. I mean, I will say with Mrs. Flood that we recently had, it was on TV, it was done a few months ago, Doctor Who did kind of a special at the Proms at the Royal Albert Hall, which is basically the Doctor Who theme. She's played by an orchestra and stuff, and sometimes characters show up. And also, the actor who plays Mrs. Flood, her name is Anita Dobson. But Anita Dobson showed up in characters of Mrs. Flood at the Proms and just got a massive cheer from the fans.
Oh, wow.
So the fans really, really seem to have taken to this character. So, again, it could be total bullshit. If it doesn't happen, don't send me your emails. It's a fun theory. And it's a theory that makes a degree of sense. So it's just a fun thing to think about. So if we end up now just with, you've kind of already revealed yours, Mike, with our MVPs. You said yours, Nicola Coughlan. Anything you want else to say about her you haven't mentioned yet?
I think it's a big, heavy lift that is entrusted upon that performer, and it would be really easy to make that almost cloying or just sort of sympathetic in a certain type of Christmassy way. But I think just that ability to go from somebody who was very kind and very sweet and very simple to just letting that anger out was really, really interesting to me.
Again, I suspect I know who yours is going to be, Rick, but if you reveal your MVP, please.
I'm giving it to two people. Steph Diwali as Anita and Joel Fry as Trev, because he did a lot with what little he was given.
I mean, sorry, just quickly say with Nicola Coughlan that if you're not familiar with her and you weren't overly impressed by her in this, I'll tell you now, she's a very, very good actor. And her star is probably only going to get bigger. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point you see her in American productions. Generally, people that aren't from America seem to be quite good at doing American accents. So, yeah, my MVP is Steph Diwali as Anita. And it's wild when you rewatch it, knowing what you know about the episode. I forget the whole Mrs. Flood thing. I just mean about this episode. When Joy talks to her, I mentioned Joy's very talkative. When Joy checks into the hotel, Anita is totally uninterested. She's in a dull job, going nowhere, working on Christmas. Of course you'd be like that. And she acts like someone who has never had a person show any interest. I don't even mean a romantic interest, just interest in her as a person. Until she meets the Doctor, which is a very kind of, you mentioned the Christmas co-star is meant to be person could have been a companion. In the end, that's what Anita was. There's a line when I think she asked the Doctor, I don't have a boyfriend, and she's kind of like, yeah, who needs boyfriends? In a way where you realise she doesn't actually mean that. She only, Doctor said everyone has said how great you are, and she's like, only one guy's ever said that. So much of that, another timeline, this could have almost been Donna. This is very much in line with the kind of person Donna was before she met the Doctor. Again, a person who's not old, but is not in her early 20s. And you think, she kind of came in off the bench with a big play to win the game with like 10 seconds left, because no one was looking at her. I wasn't looking at her when the episode started, and you end up kind of like the Doctor did over that year. You end up really, really warming to her, and she was almost the character I was thinking about at the end of the episode more than any other. She's the one that I think left the biggest mark. I honestly think, Rick, and I think a lot of fans have said this, can we bring her back, please, in some fashion? Yeah. I think everyone will be really happy in some form to see her back. And I think at the worst case scenario of this, Steph Diwali is going to get meet and greet work at cons off the back of this performance. At the very least, if she's at a con, there will be some people who will want to get an autograph, have a chat, take a picture with her, because people will be like, "Oh, you were so good in Joy to the World. I loved you in that." And she had. I did briefly look at like her own website, because I've never seen her in anything. She hasn't really been in much of any note that anyone would know in this country or abroad. But on the front page are just all like the review blurbs from her performance in Joy to the World, and there are a lot, and they're fully merited. And yes, I think she stole this episode. I think she was excellent.
Absolutely.
I don't know how the novels are working anymore. I don't know how many they're cranking out or producing, because I just don't have time to read them, so I try not to look. But to me, seems the obvious novel is what happened in that year.
Sure, Big Finish, that feels...
Yeah, something like that. Something like maybe she doesn't run around and do the adventures, but maybe there's the Doctor's running off doing something, and then we have another conversation. But it just feels like something that somebody will try to fill in or try to tell more stories from, some 4-issue.
It's Anita in the Time Hotel. What? Look at all the stuff she would have seen in the Time Hotel. I mean, that's at the very least someone's writing fanfic of that. Okay, so yes, if you have any thoughts on what we've spoken about here, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com, and we're also available across social media at analysingdw. So Rick, Mike, thank you for both being here.
Hey, thanks for having us on.
And thank you all for listening. We'll be back in around 6 weeks. Until next time. Our logo was courtesy of Scott Mattison. His work can be found at planetrisecreative.com and on Twitter at planetrise. Our theme tune is by Mike Mould. We can be reached at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com and on Twitter at analysingdw.